How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Hello, my friends. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I was going to talk about the government shutdown, and I'll get there. But my niece actually just sent me something that I think is probably worth spending some time on. So my niece lives outside of Memphis with I've got my sister and brother-in-law, and then two of their children live just north of Memphis in the Brighton, Tennessee area. That is Tipton County, just north of Memphis. And their church partners with a group called A Way Out Ministries. A Way Out Ministries helps rescue women and children from human trafficking. And my niece just sent me this and said she thought it was very notable, and I sure do. It's not getting a lot of attention, the president having sent the National Guard to Memphis. Now, first of all, I got to point something out to you. The American Press Corps was outraged about Donald Trump sending the National Guard to Washington, D.C., which is his purview to do as president of the United States. It's a federal district. They were outraged. A bunch of white people in the press were outraged about it. And in fact, it had a meaningful impact on crime in Washington, D.C., such that even the mayor of Washington, D.C. has said so. Notice how quiet they are about Memphis. They're upset about Chicago because the Democratic politicians up there are upset. You haven't heard anything about Memphis. And a lot of it is because the white people in the press who are upset about Washington, D.C., they don't live anywhere near Memphis. They don't care about the people of Memphis. They do not care. This reminds me of a story I've told you before. Bill Shine, good friend of mine, was Roger Ailes' number 2 at Fox. And in 2009, I got an offer from CNN to go work at CNN, and when Sean Hannity found out about it, he got Bill Shine to reach out and offer me a deal at Fox. And I would have gone to Fox except for Rush Limbaugh. Rush actually told me I needed to go to CNN, that I'd eventually be able to jump to Fox if I was good at CNN, that Roger Ailes would want to hire me, which he wound up doing. But I needed to go to CNN first and learn how to talk to people who disagree with me before I just talk to an amen chorus. It's good. Very good point. But Bill Shine, when he was making the case for Fox, pulled out a map of the United States. He clearly had done this with a lot of people, pulled out a map of the U.S. He drew circles around the coast, a little circle in North Carolina, and he said CNN and MSNBC focus on the coastal elite. They care about the news that happens 50 miles from the coast. MSNBC is a little ahead of CNN, and he pointed out the circle in North Carolina, the Raleigh-Durham area, and said they care about the college towns too. Fox is number 1 because they care about everywhere within 50 miles of a river valley, of which there are many more people. You will hear about the National Guard on Fox News in Memphis, Tennessee, because Memphis is right on a river valley. They're in the Mississippi River Valley. And it's coverage that real Americans in real places outside of L.A., San Francisco, New York, D.C., and Chicago, and Miami care about. A Way Out Ministries put this on their Facebook page. Memphis was noticeably different tonight on outreach. Sycamore View hotels that normally have a lot of exploitation taking place has no cars and were empty. Lamar, where we see so many young girls out being heavily monitored, was also empty. We asked bouncers if they had seen a difference, and every one of them said absolutely. One described all the drugs that were always being sold by the club's fence. It's now quiet and empty. We also saw the attached brochure in the window of a hotel on Sycamore View from HSI on human trafficking. In all our years conducting outreach, we've never seen these signs out. Inside the clubs, there were so many girls asking for very specific prayers. Please keep one specifically in prayer who had 2 boys who are beginning to struggle with anger. Pray she will reach out so we can connect them to counseling. We've got grant funds to help. 2 girls were visiting from Nashville because the club they worked at closed. They were so blown away and appreciative of us coming and praying. Keep the woman in prayer in the second image who has a soft but bubbly demeanor. Pray for our city tonight and every man and woman we encounter. It's from a ministry in Memphis, Tennessee. With the National Guard presence in Memphis, there are less drugs on the street. There are less signs of human trafficking, less signs of people being forced into prostitution, less signs of prostitution, less signs of crime. Crime is down in Memphis, Tennessee, because the President of the United States sent the National Guard to help local law enforcement, and Bill Lee, the governor of Tennessee, gets a lot of credit for saying, yes, please come. And they came. My niece sends along a note saying that they've seen significant impacts on the crowds at clubs, drug deals on street corners. It's all down thanks to the increased task force presence. The president deserves credit for this, and he's not getting the credit. And the media outside of Fox News doesn't care because they don't care about places like Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis is a tourist town. For them to go drinking on whatchamadiggee Street down there, Beale Street. Maybe there's a sporting activity that takes them to Memphis. Maybe they go to the Pyramid in Memphis, see the Bass Pro Shop. But the media doesn't care. They cared about D.C. and notice they cared about the controversy and the anger and the rage of the locals who were upset the president was sending the National Guard. And once it worked and crime went down, they stopped covering it. It was a non-story. In fact, one of the most famous iconic images was of the 3 women dressed as the handmaidens from that Handmaid's Tale awful book and TV show, angrily talking to members of the National Guard. And behind them, a lot of black Americans living their lives, walking through Union Station in Washington, D.C., unafraid and not fearing being mugged. It was the 3 white women who were all upset and all the black people living happy lives behind them. It's so interesting to me. People forget that part of the big bias of the media is how the media doesn't cover certain stories. Here is on the ground, documented eyewitness accounts from Memphis. Drug dealing is down, crime is down, prostitution is down, signs of human trafficking are down. Have you heard about that on the ABC Nightly? More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source. Have you heard about it? I bet you haven't from ABC News. What about CBS and NBC? You probably haven't. PBS? No. CNN? No. MSNBC? Certainly not. MSNBC is talking through gritted teeth, talking about the president of the Middle East and what a triumph it was. In Memphis, the president's policy to crack down on crime is a success. The governor of Tennessee has successfully made the case to target Memphis to show it could work, and it has. And people feel safe. Memphis is safe. You can go downtown at Beale Street. You can see the ducks come out of the hotel there. You can have a good time. You don't have to look over your back. You don't have to keep your wallet in your front pocket. You're going to be safe now. That's true. I got to tell you, again, I got family that live just outside of Memphis. They don't feel safe going into Memphis. They don't feel safe driving through Memphis. Memphis is not a safe town. They bragged and bragged and bragged about the decrease in murders in Memphis, saying, why do we need the president? Why do we need the National Guard? Look, murders are down over 100%, and still Memphis is in the top 5 for murders in America. That's a really damning indictment on Memphis, by the way. They're bragging about the massive drop in murders, and it's still a top 5 city per capita for murder in the United States. It's wild to me that they thought it was a good thing. It's wild to me that they actually thought that it was somehow a useful measure to tout. But you know what? Murder's really down in Memphis now. Drug trafficking, really down in Memphis now. Battery crimes, assaults, rapes, break-ins, really down in Memphis now. It's just the reality. But you're not going to hear that on the evening news because it's a successful Trump policy. Remember, the rule of this is Erickson rule of the press, number one. It is my most cited rule when you're dealing with the press. The media highlights the beneficiaries of Democrat policies and the victims of Republican policies. Without fail, the media highlights the beneficiaries of Democratic policies and the victims of Republican policies. It's why in the government shutdown, they're not highlighting people harmed by the shutdown because, one, there aren't a lot, and two, they would be victims of Democratic policies, and the media can't do that. You're not hearing about what's happening in Memphis because there aren't any victims. There are beneficiaries, but a Republican is president, and it's a Republican policy, so they're not going to cover the story. They covered the story in Washington, D.C. because it was the run-up to the deployment of the troops. But notice, like, the media goes out of its way to, the president rounded up a grandfather in Chicago and said he was an illegal alien. He was an American citizen. They're trying to deport an American citizen. We can't have that. In Washington, D.C., they tried to do that. It's like, that guy's like a serial killer gangbanger. They had to drop that. Stop talking about it. And here's another thing, the law enforcement activity in Washington, the president had 30 days to nationalize the police force down there. It's gone back. There's still federal troops there, but the police are back under the control of the mayor. And notice the media's not even talking about a surge in crime because the National Guard's still there. They cover the beneficiaries of Democratic policies, the victims of Republican policies, and what happens when there are reduced victims because of Republican policies. They stop talking about the story. It's too inconvenient for the press. I got the TVs on in my office right now. I got Pat McAfee talking football. I got Fox News talking Charlie Kirk. I got CNBC talking about crude oil prices falling again. Hallelujah. The lowest level in some time. CNN, they're talking about this Pentagon restriction on the press and how all the news networks other than OAN are bailing on the Pentagon. They're not talking about Memphis. They're not talking about the crime in Washington, D.C. They're not talking about New Orleans where the president may send the National Guard. They're not talking about the real world. They're talking about how the news impacts them. They're talking about how the Pentagon is impacting reporters. Notice that it is the single-minded obsession. They got Brian Stelter on right now talking about this. The single-minded obsession of the press is how is Orange Man bad to them? Here is the doll. We will show you where Donald Trump hurt us. That's how the press covers Donald Trump. Let's show you on the doll where he hurt us this time. He gagged us at the Pentagon. They don't want to show you anything about the people in Memphis who feel like they can go out on the streets at night. Immigration has fallen out of the top 5 concerns for Americans right now. Crime continues to be one of the top 5 concerns. The economy and inflation. I don't know why they separate those into two things, but inflation, the economy, and crime, those are the top 3 issues right now. Actually, I think immigration is actually number 5 now. It was number 1. It's fallen number 5. So in the top 5, but out of the top 3, immigration, the inflation, the economy, and crime, the 3 big issues right now. And the president is fighting on crime. He has fought on immigration successfully. The press tried to victimize a lot of people who were deported unsuccessfully. Too many of the people the press tried to highlight turned out to be gangbangers. So now with crime, it's really hard. When there's a reduction in victims, if the Democrats were in charge and did this, they'd be all over how Patty Smith used to walk at night, her dog, and she was always looking up behind her. She was always afraid. Down her street, she had been mugged repeatedly. The neighbors knew her. They called her Mugger Maggie because she was mugged so many times walking her dog. And now, thanks to the policies of President Kamala Harris, she's not looking behind her at night. She hasn't been mugged in 6 months. The neighborhood, they've even forgotten her nickname. She is safe at night thanks to the policies of Kamala Harris. Except it's Donald Trump, so they're not going to cover the story. They're not going to cover the story because she's no longer a victim. If, however, the gangbanger shot her up on Donald Trump's watch, they'd be all over this story. Everybody in America would know her name. But because she's safe and not a victim, and it's Donald Trump as president and not Kamala Harris, you're not hearing about what's happening in Memphis, real improvements there in the city. A good friend of mine last night sent me a link to an Instagram interview of Eric Prince, the military operator. He's run private security forces around the world. He has a terrible reputation in the press because he's a conservative or a Republican. He's actually a great guy, and he wants to provide private military services to protect Christians in Nigeria. 100,000 Nigerian Christians over the past few years have been murdered. We've been focusing on the massacre of Israelis by Hamas. The Hamas sympathizers have been screaming about genocide in Gaza. No one is talking about the actual genocide of Christians in Nigeria. Is it not very interesting to you how very quiet people are about what's happening to the Nigerian Christians? Eric Prince is asking for help from the Pope to fund private security. Why not the American government? Why not private donors in this country as well? Why aren't people pooling their resources to help provide protection for the Christians of Nigeria? They are being ruthlessly exterminated by Islamic radicals tied to ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and others. We have a real opportunity, I think, to step up and save the Christians of Nigeria who are ruthlessly harassed and murdered, gunned down in their homes. Eric Prince has a plan to do it, but this needs the attention of the president, the Pope, and everybody else out there to provide protection for these people. Now, let me tell you about Americans for Prosperity. They are providing a way for you to get involved in politics in this country that makes a real difference. Americans for Prosperity is the largest leading grassroots group in the country. They happen to be conservatives. They advance common sense conservative reforms, and they really would like you to reach out and get involved if you want to. AFPvolunteer.com is the website, AFPvolunteer.com. Americans for Prosperity has been around for quite a while. They've got chapters in every state. They advance things like school choice, common sense tax reforms. They help the president get his tax plan past Congress, permitting reform that just got passed in the Senate. They get involved all the way down to the local level, passing real conservative reforms. If you would like to find out more, if you'd like to get involved, I'm on their board of advisors, might meet you around the country. I've been doing events for them around the country. You go to AFPvolunteer.com, AFPvolunteer.com. Sign up with Americans for Prosperity today. Get involved with AFP, and you will find out how to make a difference in your community, how to talk to your neighbors, how to be the most informed person in your circle of friends when it comes to public policy, and actually put points on the board for the conservative movement. AFPvolunteer.com is the website. Find out more, join AFP, and maybe I'll see you around the country with Americans for Prosperity. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson. I guess I should check the phone. Sorry, I've been busy talking with you guys and haven't actually looked to see is there anybody on hold right now that's been waiting desperately. My apologies. Very unprofessional of me, except, well, the call screening program has been messing up off and on today, so I haven't been able to see. But nonetheless, it'll open eventually. 877-973-7425 is the number. Chuck Schumer, you need to release your hostages. Hamas has released its hostages. Chuck Schumer can release his. The American people are being held hostage by the Democrats right now, but it doesn't really feel like a hostage situation, does it? Hamas's hostages were held in tunnels and nearly starved. In this country, well, if you're on WIC, your kids may soon be starving because of the Democrats. But it's completely different. You know, the Democrats for years have said the Republicans were hostage takers. If they decided to shut down the government, and suddenly the Democrats are like, oh, no, it's the Republicans' fault. They can get rid of the filibuster. If they just get rid of the filibuster, they can reopen the government. Speaker Mike Johnson is quoting Barack Obama now.
Democrats in the Senate have been around a long time, and they'll remember this important plea, and I'll leave you with this thought. Listen closely to what I say here. Quote, there's only one way out of this reckless and damaging shutdown. Pass a budget that funds our government with no partisan strings attached. The American people don't get to demand ransom in exchange for doing their job. Neither does Congress. They don't get to hold our democracy or our economy hostage over a settled law. That's not how our democracy is supposed to work. That's why I won't pay a ransom in exchange for reopening the government. I'll always work with anyone of either party on ways to grow this economy, create new jobs, and get our fiscal house in order for the long haul, but not under the shadow of these threats, unquote. What I just read was a direct quote. Those are not my words. They belong to President Barack Obama.
That's right. He's using Obama's words against the Democrats. That was the time when the Democrats said that you got to do a clean continuing resolution or else you're taking the American people hostage. Because the Democrats' own words, there's a guy who comes after me on Twitter occasionally. He's a progressive Democrat. He's blaming the Republicans, saying they could reopen the government tomorrow by getting rid of the filibuster, or they can work with the Democrats. I'm like, you are so intellectually dishonest because when the Republicans shut it down, you were blaming the Republicans. You will never blame the Democrats. The Democrats want the credit for shutting down the government. They want all the left-wing activist groups to praise them for fighting Donald Trump and shutting down the government. They do not want the blame for shutting down the government. What exactly are they shutting the government down for? Here's the speaker again.
And they would send $500 million to liberal news outlets by refunding the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. It would also restore up to $5 billion of American taxpayer funds for wasteful spending for international projects. Here's a couple of examples. This is in their legislation, their counterproposal on the CR to keep the lights open. This is what they want to do. They want to spend $24.6 million of your hard-earned dollars as a taxpayer for climate resilience in Honduras. They want to spend $13.4 million for civic engagement in Zimbabwe. They want to send $3.9 million for LGBTQI plus democracy grants in the Western Balkans. They want to spend $2.9 million of your dollars for desert locust risk reduction in the Horn of Africa, and $2 million for, quote, organizing for feminist democratic principles in Africa. We are not doing that.
Seriously, he's not making that up. Those are things the Democrats are demanding to reopen the federal government.
Again, we have to be very clear. The shutdown did not have to happen, but every American needs to understand why it did. And I'll reiterate, I'll summarize for you very briefly again what happened. It happened because while Republicans are working to ensure the American people are taken care of, Democrats are playing a political game. Unlike 2013, the Democrat Party is utterly rudderless. There have been times in the past where there were shutdowns. Democrats today have no leader, no vision, no direction. The party's at their lowest point in decades in terms of public opinion polls. And so they threw this Hail Mary pass. Chuck Schumer knows this. He reads the polls religiously. He knows his party is furious with him for doing the right thing back in March when he helped to pass a clean CR and avert a government shutdown. It was the right thing to do. He said so himself emphatically on the Senate floor.
That's the president. That's the Speaker of the House talking about the Democrats, what they have refused to do. One last clip from the Speaker here.
The Senate Democrats cannot tell voters that they're willing to hold hostage funding for the nutrition of women, infants, and children in exchange for restoring health care to illegal aliens. So they want to do this behind closed doors. And you've heard Chuck Schumer say breathlessly, I just want the four leaders to get in a back room and make a deal. We're not doing that. We're not doing that anymore. We're getting back to regular order, and it's infuriating that that's what he continues to demand.
Now, what is regular order? You should understand that this is a technicality, and I wish they wouldn't say it that way. Regular order is, you know how a bill becomes a law. Remember old Schoolhouse Rock and how a bill becomes a law. It goes through the House, it goes through the Senate, and once it goes through the legislative process, it gets signed into law by the president. That's the process. And that process is called regular order. Yeah, y'all remember this, don't you? From way back in the day.
Woo, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city.
Yeah, that's, I'm Just a Bill, Schoolhouse Rock back in the day, and it outlined the process of how a bill is passed, and that's called regular order. What the House and the Senate have been doing the last number of years is they have allowed the leadership to write all the bills, push them through committee to the floor, and get it done. Leadership authored legislation. Regular order is when individual members of the House and the Senate draft legislation. It's put in the hopper in the House and the Senate, referred to a committee that's appropriate for it. The committee reviews it. Democrats and Republicans together chime in to improve the bill. It's voted out of committee or killed in committee. If voted out of committee, it goes to the Rules Committee that sets parameters for debate, and then to the floor of the House of Representatives, where it's debated, amended, marked up. If passed, sent to the Senate, debated in the committee. If passed, goes to the floor of the committee, to the Senate, is debated, amended, marked up. If passed, if changed in form, goes back to the House, has to pass in the exact same form. If not, they do a conference committee, and then it goes to the President of the United States. That's regular order. So each member becomes distinctly powerful and representative of their constituents. It's an abandonment of the leadership-driven principles that were really started in late 2006 after the Democrats took over from the Republicans. And the Republicans decided to start, and the Democrats decided to start doing this stuff. Both sides have done it notoriously. Members have been calling for years for regular order. The Republicans in the Senate in particular, John Thune said, we're doing regular order. We're going to allow the committee process to work. Democrats and Republicans together improving legislation. And now the Democrats are like, nope, you got to give us this, and you got to give us this, and you got to give us this to reopen the government. And Thune and Johnson are like, listen, we're going to reopen the government if you will vote for it, and then just go through regular order. Go through order. Improve the legislation in committee if you can get the votes, and then we'll vote on it. But the left right now wants a fight. The left doesn't want to do anything because the left has internalized the idea that they're funding Hitler, and they don't want to fund Hitler. And so any compromise by the Democrats to reopen the government funds Adolf Hitler in their mind. Ironically, Adolf Hitler, who a year ago was working at McDonald's and yesterday got peace in the Middle East, quite a career for Adolf. The Democrats don't want to fund any of it. This is one more from the speaker.
He's determined that his own political survival is worth the irreversible harm he's inflicting on the American people. He's gambling with people's lives and livelihoods to appease the far-left Marxist base of his party so that he can keep his job. And make no mistake, this is bigger than Chuck Schumer. Democrats are terrified of their radical Marxist base.
They are. So there's a No Kings protest in Washington, D.C. this Saturday. The No Kings protest is funded by a bunch of left-wing activists, including the Soroses and others. Antifa comes to Washington. But have you noticed, by the way, there's this really explosive movement on the left in the media now saying Antifa's not real. Antifa's just a thing. People call themselves Antifa. It's not a real organization, except it is. And you will notice since we stopped funding non-governmental organizations through the State Department, how less effective Antifa has become. Isn't that curious? Antifa is an organized movement funded by the left with a bunch of masked up goons. They don't want ICE to wear masks, but they want to wear masks. They've been harassing the federal government. They've been doxing ICE agents. They've harassed private businesses. And they're headed to Washington on Saturday. We'll see how much of the city is standing after their protests. Chuck Schumer, the Democrats, have been telling people behind the scenes that they don't want to open until after Saturday because, remember, if they open, if they compromise, if they come up with any plan, that plan will be to fund ICE. It will be to fund the National Guard in Memphis. And they've convinced themselves Donald Trump's an authoritarian despot, and they will be voting to fund him. Anything they do, the Democrats would rather, their internalized progressive base would rather shut down the entire government and keep it shut down rather than fund Donald Trump's administration. And that position is unacceptable to the Democrats in Washington, frankly, because they believe there are a lot of programs the Democrats like that are going to get shut down, and Russ Vought is going to just keep firing people. They've already laid off people at the CDC and HHS. They've laid off people in the Department of Education. They're laying off the Jet Propulsion Lab. They're laying off a lot of people. Some of them are being permanently fired now by Russ Vought, and the Democrats in the Senate realize if they keep this closed too much longer, a lot of the people that they like inside government are going to lose their jobs. But they can't do it until after Saturday because of the No Kings protest. And it's going to be kind of funny, isn't it? Where they come back next week and suddenly, we got a deal to open the government. Isn't it funny? I think the Antifa activists are going to realize they were played. They were head patted. Welcome to the club. It's what the Republicans have done for years to pro-lifers and small government conservatives. We get a big head pat before we're betrayed. Well, now you guys get the same thing. Maybe they'll get a little handsy with you at least so you'll enjoy it. They pat you on the head and maybe squeeze you somewhere and say, guess what? We're going to stick it to the Republicans, and then 2 days later open the government. But you got some handsies from the Democrats. Chuck Schumer gave you a feel up before he betrayed you. That at least the Democrats will make you enjoy it before they betray you. I'm a small government conservative. I am really used to Republicans. They don't even make it fun. They just stab you in the back. They tell you that they're gonna stand with you against the Democrats. They're gonna stand against Obamacare. They're gonna stand up and keep the government shut down. And 2 days later, they knife you in the back and say, "Well, I mean, you are hurting the economy, you traitor. Why aren't you patriotic?" That's what the Democrats are going to do to you guys on the left. I have seen this. I have been the victim of it. I have been stabbed in the back by the GOP. I personally would love the government to shut down and stay shut down. I'm a big proponent of government shutdowns. When the government is dysfunctional, we are safe. But at some point, they'll reopen it to meet payroll. And you people on the left will fund Hitler. It's not Hitler. It's Donald Trump. Stop believing your own rhetoric on this stuff. He just got peace in the Middle East. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I have news. This is a developing story. There has been a coup in Madagascar. That's right. For those of you who do not know, for those of you in Rio Linda, which is actually, I've got listeners in my audience listening on KSTE in Sacramento who are in Rio Linda, California. And for those of you in Rio Linda who may not know, Madagascar is an island off the coast of Africa. It's a very large island off the coast of Africa. It was once a French colony. There has been a coup in Madagascar. And to answer the question that I know every last one of you has, it does not appear to be the penguins. It does not appear that the penguins of Madagascar have launched the coup. It appears to be a Gen Z coup. It wasn't Mort. Nope, it was not Mort. It was somebody, some group of kids, some group of 20-somethings who they saw the coup in Nepal and decided that it was time to launch a coup because the government has been failing the people of Madagascar. The president of Madagascar has fled. The military was given orders to shoot the protesters. Instead, the military declared themselves on the side of the protesters and have now taken over the country. The Supreme Court in Madagascar has ratified what happened, said that the president has fled the scene. He was impeached pretty quickly by the legislature. And a lot of this has a lot to do with the failures to address the problems of the young. This has been happening actually around the world. If you haven't heard about this, it has happened in Nepal. as well. It has happened in Bangladesh. Young voters disaffected by government. They can't find jobs. There aren't opportunities. There's massive inflation. They have rioted and brought down governments around the world. And it's a warning sign in this country, not because I don't think we're going to have a coup or anything like that, but younger Americans have a harder and harder time finding jobs. And with the rise of AI, where there's a lot of speculation increasingly, it's going to be harder for kids to get lower level jobs because their jobs will be replaced by AI. They're going to have to pile on student loan debt if their parents aren't wealthy enough to help them pay for college to get the advanced degree to be able to jump ahead of the AI into positions, and it's going to be hard for them to acquire experience. These things matter, and there are a lot of people way smarter than me already thinking about the logical implications of them, but there are some implications even in this country as young people are frustrated without a lot of opportunities. They've been promised a lot, and yet they're not getting what they were promised. And many of them are convinced that their parents' generation didn't have the hard time they're having, or the generation between them and their parents. And actually, in most cases, they did. They just never heard the stories. It's one thing, by the way, parents, tell your children your hard stories from getting married and living life, so they don't think that they are alone in this. I can't tell you the number of people who just in their 20s think, oh, it didn't suck for my parents. They had it easy. Listen, I'm here to tell you, I did not have it easy. Now, let me tell you about Eden Pure, and you can get 3 of their Eden Pure thunderstorms for less than $200. You save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. It's an air purifier. It gets rid of dust, it gets rid of pollen, it gets rid of pet dander, anything floating in the air. It kills 99.9% of bacteria and viruses that flow through it. It generates plasma, kills 99.9% of bacteria and viruses. But where it really shines, the way I use it is an odor eliminator. It generates ozone, so I don't leave it running all the time because of the ozone. But when I need it, I can plug it in, and the ozone that it generates wipes out every odor. Ozone is O3. It's an unstable oxygen molecule. O2 is stable. That's what you breathe. O3 is ozone. That's what's in the upper atmosphere. And it wants to get rid of that oxygen atom. And when it touches the charged particles that are odors, it releases that extra atom of oxygen. It neutralizes the particles, and it cleans the air. It just works. Now, that's my layman's explanation. Don't shoot me if I got it slightly wrong, but it works. You get 3 of them. You go to EdenPureDeals.com, put in the discount code ERIC3, ERICK3 at EdenPureDeals.com.